Seems like my job here is really just to prove that I'm smarter than everybody at the National Review, which is fine. I don't mind doing it. This week, I found a real doozy that I'd like to go over with you guys. You ready for this? Oh boy, you're gonna love this. No, white supremacy isn't to blame for Tyre Nichols' death. Oh great. Okay, we we know we're in for a special treat here. This is gonna be a nice heaping banana split sundae of racism, possibly covered with sprinkles of hate. I don't know. We shouldn't joke about this. Is it any coincidence that they used a photo of NYPD here where a black officer is mean mugging the camera? That can't mean anything, can it? Surely not. Who's this written by? Charles C.W. Cook. That's, you guys got at least one too many initial. Oh God, this Muppet looking motherfucker. He's not even he's not even American. I would kind of expect them to trot out a Thomas Sowell type for this type of article, but they're going with Charles C.W. Cook, CCWC, as we call him on the Reuters wire, on the CB radio. To argue otherwise is to stray from the foundational American principle that all men are created equal. What is he talking about? Is he doing an annoying thing where, this think piece is also the first line of the same document. So we actually have to read this. No, white supremacy isn't to blame for Tyre Nichols' death. I have to read that bullshit again. And then we go down to argue otherwise is to stray from the foundational American principle that all men are created equal. All right, well, you're going to have to back that up. What do you call it when back it up with an open question, rhetorical probably. What do you call it when 5 black cops brutally beat a black man to death in violation of their oaths, their duties, and all respect for the sanctity of human life? Murder. Answer, white supremacy. Yeah, that it could be. Yeah, it could be that too. I mean, it's probably that. Alas, what kind of dork? Take your British ass alas back to your fucking UK, bro. I am not kidding. In a piece for CNN on Friday, the political commentator Van Jones argued that the killing of Tyre Nichols showed it is time to move to a more nuanced discussion of the way police violence endangers black lives, and in particular, time to comprehend that one of the sad facts about anti-black racism is that black people ourselves are not immune to its pernicious effects. At the end of the day, Jones wrote, it is the race of the victim who is brutalized, not the race of the violent cop, that is most relevant in determining whether racial bias is a factor in police violence. Right. So we judge whether a system is white supremacist based on its outputs, not on its inputs. What matters is who is being harmed. Are they mostly non-white people that are being harmed by the system? Well, then that is a white supremacist system. It doesn't matter what the inputs are, how many non-white people are designing it or participating in it or managing it. If the outcome serves to uphold white supremacy, it's a white supremacist system. I mean, I think that we could apply this to, just about anything in our lives, and perhaps we will later. In Saturday's New York Times, old-timey Sheriff Clyde McGrady provided panoplies, motherfucker, of quotes in support of this notion. Nichols' killing, McGrady suggested, has brought into focus what many black people have said is frequently lost in brutality cases involving white officers and black victims, that problems of race and policing are a function of entrenched police culture of aggression and dehumanization of black people more than of interpersonal racism. Putting this case more bluntly, Representative Maxwell Alejandro Frost tweeted out, doesn't matter what color those police officers are, the murder of Tyre Nichols is anti-black and the result of white supremacy. Right, this is something that is like obvious to anybody, is that, again, the system is judged by its outputs, not its inputs. Does anybody truly believe, or is anybody arguing that these 5 black cops beat this black young man to death because of racial animus that they had? I don't think anybody's making that argument. The only thing that you really have left to do is to look at who it is that they beat, and does that outcome Does that match a pattern throughout a system? And it does. It matches a pattern nationwide of mostly non-white people being brutalized on a daily basis by the police. But if you just miss the forest for the trees and you just look and at this one particular incident and you just say, oh God, one black guy beaten to death by a bunch of other cops that happen to be black, gosh, this is just one of those things you'll never be able to fucking connect to every other fucking time that this happens in the United States. Give me a fucking break, Thomas Cook, whatever the fuck you are, Captain. You're a fool. Go on, though. There's little to be gained from euphemisms at a time like this, so I'll be as blunt as I can. Motherfucker, who's telling you to use euphemisms? No one asked you to do that. This is absurd, he says. Take a look at the flowchart that Van Jones, Maxwell Alejandro Frost, and Clyde McGrady's interviewees have built, and you will note immediately, there is no circumstance in which the killing of a black American will not be deemed the product of white supremacy, God forbid. If the cops act consciously in the name of white supremacy, that's white supremacy. If the cops don't act consciously in the name of white supremacy, that's white supremacy. If the cops are white, it's white supremacy. If the cops are not white, it's white supremacy too. Whatever the input, whatever the details, the result is always the same. White supremacy. That's not logic, it's magic. Okay, so we found that flowchart that Captain Cook here, that he's reporting on. This woke flowchart, okay? If cops are acting consciously in the name of white supremacy and they beat a black man to death, that is white supremacy. Okay, I think that tracks. If a bunch of cops are not acting consciously in the name of white supremacy and they beat a black man to death, that is white supremacy. The black guy ends up dead. So that makes sense. Okay, so let's see here. If white cops beat a black man to death, that's white supremacy. That makes sense. I think that's intuitive. Okay, if non-white cops beat a black man to death, that is also white supremacy, presumably for the same reasons that not acting consciously in the name of white supremacy, you happen to beat a black man to death as a cop, that is in service of white supremacy. Honestly, that all checks out. Worse yet, it's a theory that treats black Americans as if they are inferior citizens who, oh God, the concern trolling is very powerful here. By the same standards as everyone else. If, as you should, you sincerely believe that all people are equal, then you cannot cast some of them as mere automatons when it is politically convenient to do so. All right? To acknowledge a person's intrinsic equality is to fully accept his capacity for good and evil, without engaging in transparent special pleading, without making vague appeals to the culture, and without offering excuses for his conduct when you would condemn a culprit of a different race unequivocally for the same behavior. This is fucking nonsense. This is, when I say I'm smarter than the National Review people, I mean it. And you are too, because you're easily smarter than me. You're watching me on YouTube. You have to be more intelligent than I am. I think what he's trying to say, trying and failing to say, based on his use of the word automaton and also this weird problem he has where I think he's saying that, basically you liberals are so racist because you don't ascribe these black cops enough, what's the fucking word? Agency, that you'll hold them accountable for their actions. As though you're saying these black cops who killed this man were driven by white supremacy and nothing else, had no other motivations whatsoever, which is absurd. I mean, that's just silly. I mean, no one is arguing that these guys should be let off the hook because they're just patsies to white supremacy and played no role in their own fate and the fate, frankly, of the deceased. No one's absolving them of anything, and that's what all this mixed up gobbledygook reverse, like, oh, the racism of lowered expectations bullshit is. I mean, it's poorly rendered and also just fucking incoherent when you can make any sense of it. So that's like 2 strikes against this fucking line. There is, I'm afraid, not a great deal of substantive difference between the case that Van Jones and company are making in indirect defense of the 5 officers in Memphis. No, and the case that bigots of the past once made against treating non-whites as full members of society. Certainly their intent is different, but at root both cases rely upon the same ugly implication, which is that the behavior of black citizens is ultimately beyond those citizens' control. No one is saying this. I do not believe this. Well, that's because it's not true, you fucking moron. Nobody's fucking saying it. The 5 cops who killed Tyre Nichols did a heinous thing, and it is precisely because I believe in their full and irrevocable equality that I intend to judge them unreservedly for having done it. Those men are my peers, and they should be treated as such. This guy has somehow just racismed himself into the correct position. Let's see how he fucks it up. What is the alternative? In fact, there are a couple. Oh boy. The first is that the 5 cops should be treated in precisely the same way as would a self-professed white supremacist. If, has been claimed, the actions of the 5 men were indeed driven by the pernicious effects of anti-black racism, then the men presumably ought to be charged with hate crimes, just as a white cop in a similar situation would be. In this column, Jones proposes that it is the race of the victim who is brutalized, not the race of the violent cop, that is the most relevant in determining whether racial bias is a factor in police violence. Well, if we follow that thought to its logical end, we must surely conclude that the victim was explicitly targeted because he was black, and that the cops are therefore guilty of discrimination. And if that's the case, then why not charge them as such? Naturally, we would not want a situation in which the race of the cop does not matter except for the purposes of his punishment. Okay, so the Cookster's taking it a little further than I would have it. He wants to charge the black cops with hate crimes, which is based, I think the kids call it. Obviously, he's being a little like that. I put my tongue in my cheek. But I mean, the flaw in his logic here is that nobody is arguing that these guys are white supremacists themselves and we're enacting some sort of personal white supremacist agenda. Everyone on the right side of this is arguing that these are guys who were swept up in a white supremacist system and were doing their jobs and did it so poorly and quite frankly, so flagrantly that they got caught. And the problem is that that's the job, is beating the shit out of black people. And this guy, Tyre, fucking rest in peace, had to pay the price because these morons took it too far one night and blew their whole fucking cover of kicking the shit out of people in the neighborhood and their stupid fucking G.I. Joe fucking Scorpion team thing. Give me a fucking break, you fucking children. Fuck, dude. The second cuts in the opposite direction. If, as the Times' Grady submits, our problems of race and policing are a function of an entrenched police culture of aggression and dehumanization of black people more than of interpersonal racism, then the cops in this case must be victims too. And if the cops in this case are victims too, they must surely be treated leniently by the courts. They will. They will be. I mean, certainly relevant to the people that they've sent through the system. They'll be treated preferentially to those people. The purpose of talking about entrenched cultures is to diffuse some of the responsibility for specific malfeasance. It would be mightily unfair, would it not, to identify a grand, all-encompassing, overarching conspiracy behind such fucking malfeasance again, to get to the point, and then to treat the patsies who bear proximate responsibility for that malfeasance shut up with the fucking malfeasance, Chris, as if they were the sole architects? What? And if indeed white supremacy permeates the culture of American policing, rather than just motivating the decisions of independent individual police officers, if that white supremacy is the villain no matter what individual cops might be thinking, then surely we must extend the same forbearance to white police officers who end up in the same situation. So if I'm honestly not doing this. Honestly, I'm laughing. Okay. No. If white supremacy is bad, which I don't think Mr. Cook is disputing, then it's bad for black people. And if they're caught up in a white supremacist system, we should consider them to be victims of some kind. Okay, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, sure. All things being equal, white supremacy is bad. It's bad for everybody. So therefore, if white people get mixed up in a white supremacist system and participate in and exacerbate and exploit a system that keeps them at the top of the pecking order in society, then they're just as much a victim as the lowly black gentleman who has none of the rights that you do when it matters in the street, when he runs into cops of any ethnicity. Really, what a moronic, slippery slope argument. Is that what that is? Kind of. I don't know. It's very dumb. But it's very smug. He thinks he's very clever for coming up. Oh well, if one thing is true, then the craziest thing must also be true. Gotcha. Fuck you, man. Where's this guy from? To my ears, both of these alternatives sound ridiculous and grotesque, with the notable exception of insanity, a condition that can be applied only to individuals, never to groups. I mean, we've heard of mass hysteria before, Beatlemania even. Our culture and our laws are built atop the supposition that all men are created equal, and that irrespective of their immutable characteristics, they are all endowed with the same malfeasance, I'm just kidding, with the same capacity for love, hate, benevolence, greed, altruism, selfishness, ambition, disinterest, bravery, and cowardice. Once we abandon that principle, as far too many people seem tempted to do, we enter a realm of caveats, conditions, mysticism, pseudoscience, sophistry, and caprice, from which there is no escape, and from which nothing good can ever come. It comes back to the fucking flow chart. So what he's saying is all these different permutations of this event wind up supporting the same thing, white supremacy. And he's extrapolating from there that, well, if a group of African American police officers murder a young black man, but not in such a way that is in furtherance of any personal political white supremacist agendas that they might have, that situation, that is white supremacy. Okay, that's indicative of white supremacy. And also, when a bunch of good old boy cops do the same thing and do specifically have white supremacist personal agendas, that, well, you have the same outcome here. This is both white supremacy. Well, since the outcomes are the same no matter what, since everything is white supremacy, then nothing is white supremacy. Aha! You see how clever Mr. Cook is. Because if it's everything, then it's nothing. If it's just the air we breathe, then it's nothing. Why even mention it? Instead, why don't we think about the police system like a juicer? When you put a carrot through a juicer, what comes out? Juice. When you put a fucking pineapple through a juicer, what comes out? Juice. It's pineapple juice, but it's juice. When you put an orange through, we should probably be using a different kind of. It doesn't matter. Yeah, you can have different inputs into a white supremacist system, and the outcome is going to be white supremacist because because the inputs are going through and being processed by a white supremacist system. And Mr. Cookie here thinks he can be all cute by getting up real close to this one specific incident and looking at it and saying, well, I mean, we got black guys here and a black guy is over there. It just looks like some, just your standard black on black crime, which quite honestly we don't normally care about. But look at me being the big man and saying that these guys should be prosecuted and prosecuted like everyone else. He even says, which is nice. But back to my point. Since white supremacy really can be anything, then anything is white supremacy. And since policing is white supremacist, then the white supremacists must be policemen, and vice versa. So what are you going to do about it? And that's the whole fucking point, Chris. Is that's what the system does. And you can sit there and you can point your fingers and you can say, oh well, this guy is black and this guy's black or whatever, and because of that, it's just a wash. But who's fucking dying in the streets, Chris? black men and women are dying in the streets. And that's a white supremacist outcome.